Welcome to New York's number 2 sports show. Let's discuss the 2024 New York Giants preliminary 53-man roster. And that's kind of ever evolving. It's a fluid situation, but cut down day was a few days ago. And there's been, transactions that have been coming in. So again, these things can change. But, look, the overall roster for the New York Giants, kind of unsurprisingly, probably not one of the better ones in the NFL. I wouldn't expect the Giants to necessarily be a playoff team. Look, if everything breaks right, could they be a team that ends up with 8-9 wins? Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you think about 2022, and that was a very pleasant surprise where the Giants really put together a nice season. And look, it included a road playoff win as well against the Vikings. I know they got crushed against the Eagles in the divisional round, but really that was a very good season considering all the shit that we've seen before and really after. Last season in 2023 was not very good. So it doesn't mean that it's an automatic that they're just not going to be a good team. But you do look at this roster. It's a young team. And there are certain, which we'll talk about, certain positional groups that are quite frankly not very deep. And there's definitely reason for concern, for sure. So let's jump right into it and try to go position by position and just giving my thoughts on the state of the team and where things might go. But please like and subscribe. Would be greatly appreciated and be very helpful to the channel. So the quarterback situation, not much of a surprise. So your 3 quarterbacks are going to be Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito. And the only question, and I'm not going to get so much into, obviously Daniel Jones, look, it's a make or break season for him. There's a decent chance, more than decent chance, that this is his last season with the New York Giants. However, he does control that fate and he does control his destiny. And if he is to perform well, then, look, it's certainly possible that he's back in 2025. But Daniel Jones is your starter, Drew Lock is the backup, and Tommy DeVito is the third string quarterback. And there was some thought that the Giants would maybe only carry 2 quarterbacks. But look, I'm not the biggest Tommy DeVito fan. Not that I don't appreciate the story. And look, like me having been a Syracuse grad, and DeVito was a Syracuse quarterback for a while until he transferred over to Illinois. It's, what isn't to like? But at the same time, in terms of roster construction, I don't love having 3 quarterbacks, but I also understand it. I just hope that DeVito's being kept on the roster, not because of the fanfare and not because of, a certain segment of the fan base would be really upset. I hope, and I'd like to think, look, I trust that, I'm almost 95% sure that with Joe Schoen, it's not about that. I think it simply comes down to, look, Daniel Jones is injury, he is injury prone. Drew Lock is just coming off of an injury. Now, I think he's going to be 100% by week 1, but he's coming off an injury himself that he sustained in preseason. And so DeVito, look, he is used to the system. Like, could he even challenge Drew Lock for the backup job? He could. Crazier things have happened. I mean, Drew Lock was brought in on a $5 million deal, so he is clearly the backup. But yeah, like DeVito, he could look, there's enough there that that could be a thing. So I get it. I don't have a big deal with it. I think in a perfect situation, it'd be 2 QBs, but it's 3. Running backs. And this position, also to me, not a major surprise. Devin Singletary is going to be the starter. And then you're also going to have the second and third running backs are going to be Tyrone Tracy, who was the 5th-round pick out of Purdue, rookie, and then Eric Gray, who was the 2023 5th-round pick out of Oklahoma. Now, there was a thought that Dante Turbo Miller maybe could have been the 4th running back on this roster. However, they did waive him, and he is now back on the practice squad. So that's the thing, too. It's like none of the – we'll get into this once I guess I get to the safety group where none of the Giants players were playing. That's not a surprise. It's not a deep roster. So I think that they knew in some cases, hey, we can waive this person in the case of Dante Miller and get him right back on the practice squad. And that makes a lot of sense. So no issue there as far as keeping the 3. Now, I guess I'll mention him now. Well, first, actually, Singletary is the starter. I'm really bullish on Tyrone Tracy Jr. Now he did get hurt in preseason in practice actually, and I suppose that in terms of kickoff returns, I'm not sure on this. I'm going to assume that one of Tracy or Gray will be the kick returner. I know Gunnar Olszewski, of course, we'll get into him. He'll be the punt return guy. But as far as kick return, unless there's someone I'm forgetting, which is possible, I would think it'd be one of those backup running backs that may have that position. We'll find out soon enough. But I hope Tracy, I think that he has a chance to really make a difference. Not that Eric Gray hasn't shown some ability, but I think with Tyrone Tracy, and look, he's the newer one, so there's a little more excitement there, but he's a converted wide receiver. I just like what I've seen from him, and I think that at the very least, he should maybe have a third down role. Look, they might go with Singletary, more of a workhorse role, I should say. So we'll see. But those are your three running backs. And then Jakob Johnson, who actually didn't initially make the 53-man roster. They waived him. He has experience with some of this coaching staff, most recently with the Raiders. And Carmen Brasillo, he's the offensive line coach. So it's not so much with Jakob Johnson, but a little bit, because Johnson's kind of a hybrid type guy, kind of a fullback tight end type, which you don't really see many of those players in the league anymore. But Jakob Johnson was initially waived, but then there was a transaction where Austin Schlottman, a backup center, was actually placed on IR, and so that opened up a spot. So Jakob Johnson is currently on that 53-man roster, which I think that was a bit of a surprise to some folks as well, that he hadn't made it. I think that he could be useful, if nothing else. And so him being in the mix, I think, is a good thing. Let's discuss wide receivers. Wide receivers, a little bit of a surprise, I guess. Not in terms of the top four. Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jalen Hyatt, of course, comprise your first four receivers. No surprise there. And at that, a pretty solid group, I might add. On a team that I have a lot of question marks, that right there could be pretty good. But then after that, you actually don't have any truly offensive wide receivers on this current 53, because you have Gunnar Olszewski, who is really a strictly return guy. That's just what it is. And he actually got hurt in preseason, but it sounds like he is on the mend, and all indications are he'll be good to go for the start of the season. So he'll be in the return game, a special teams guy. Then also Bryce Ford Wheaton. This was a little bit of a surprise. He was someone that was kind of ticketed to making the roster last season. He was an undrafted free agent out of West Virginia. And Ford Wheaton tore his ACL, unfortunately, in that last game against the Jets last year in the preseason. But this year, he makes it, and he is really also a special teams player. You will not find him. I mean, it would be very rare that he would be getting offensive snaps. So it was kind of between Ford Wheaton and Miles Boykin. Boykin's a veteran, and people had him on their projections for the roster, but Boykin ends up being waived, but Boykin is now on the practice squad. Now, the other story when it comes to our receiver, first off, Isaiah McKenzie, he was kind of competing with Olszewski, I guess. I mean, I guess there was a world where both could have maybe made the roster, although I don't know if that would have been a good use of it. McKenzie sustains an injury, one in which I think he will not, he is currently, I'm not even sure, he might not even be on the roster anymore, technically. Isaiah McKenzie, they said it might have been a season-ending injury. I'm not really sure. I think there might have been an injury settlement. Either way, McKenzie is not on this roster. There was a chance that he would make it. He had some history with, of course, Joe Shane and Brian Dable back in Buffalo. But he's out of the mix. And then Isaiah Hodgins was someone that, of course, really had a big role in that 2022 run. He's been a starter for the Giants for, the last season and a half. Hodgins is actually waived and lands back on the practice squad. So there's a lot of that going on where it's like, hey, for the Giants, it's kind of no harm, no foul. So Hodgins sticks around, which I think is a good thing. I'm glad that he's still with the franchise. I think that, I understand why it was done. I do, but I think he is a solid player. Also, Allen Robinson, who I never really felt like was going to make this roster. He didn't. They released him, and he has since signed on to the Lions practice squad. Tight ends, not too many surprises there. It's going to be Chris Manhertz, the veteran. He's been around for a while, more of a blocking tight end. Daniel Bellinger, of course, the fourth round pick from 2022, and then Theo Johnson, the fourth round rookie out of Penn State. So those are going to be your three tight ends. And then Lawrence Cager, he is actually on the practice squad. He also sustained an injury, so that kind of set him back a little bit, but he is still with the team. And Jack Stoll was someone that was in camp, and now I think he's actually back with the Eagles. He came from the Eagles, now he's on the Eagles practice squad. So to me, it was kind of Manhertz versus Stoll, and it was always Manhertz based on the way things were looking. And yeah, that group, Bellinger is kind of the guy that can do both, receiving and blocking. Theo Johnson's more of your like Darren Waller, Lawrence Cager, just receiving type. And then Manhertz, like I said, is a blocking tight end. So we'll see what happens there. Offensive line, which is, of course, a lot of discussion there. It's a really important position just to round out the offense here. The Giants at the moment have 9 offensive linemen. Now, they did have 10 on the active roster until Schlottman went on IR. And really, to me anyway, he was kind of number 10, the way I saw it. He was the backup center. He didn't really have a great camp, and he's a veteran. But anyway, you have your starting 5 from left to right: Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, and Jermaine Illuminor. And look, I think, and the bar has been set really low, but if they can be healthy, that 5-man unit, if they can somehow stay on the field, it may not be that bad. And maybe I'm saying this because Evan Neal is not a starter, which is kind of addition by subtraction. Look, is it a great offensive line? Absolutely not. It's not. But I think that there's some hope there, in my opinion, if they can stay healthy, because the backup situation, not ideal, especially swing tackle. Your swing tackles right now are Evan Neal and Josh Azudu. And Azudu was drafted to be a guard. I mean, this was an early third-round pick in 2022, and for some reason they just use him at tackle, and he looks terrible. So I don't get that. So if one of the tackles goes down, especially Andrew Thomas, like, you're just screwed. And then the guard backups are going to be veteran Aaron Stinney, and he is probably the one that would be the one that would kind of slot in first. If any of the 3 interior linemen were to go down, Stinney would come in. And then most recent with the Bucks. And then Jake Kubis, pretty good story, undrafted free agent that makes the squad. So he's more of a developmental type guy. But look, like, they rewarded him for a good training camp. So Kubis, I don't know if we'll see him much. I mean, if there's injuries, potentially. So that's your offensive line situation. Again, Evan Neal, I don't know. It's a total disaster. And really, I think Neal very likely will be a bust, unfortunately, which is tough when he's the 7th overall pick a couple of years ago. Let's shift over to defense. Let's start with the defensive line. And I guess there was nothing else to really discuss in terms of offensive line that didn't make it. So defensive line. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence is the big one there. And this is kind of, this is a group that is young. Rakeem Nunez-Roches is kind of, he's number 2. Next to Dexter Lawrence and certainly in early downs. So, Nunez-Roches was solid last year. He's a veteran, been around for a while. And then the backups are going to be DJ Davidson, who was a 5th-round pick a couple seasons ago. Elijah Chapman, who another undrafted free agent who had a good camp. So kind of like Kubis on the offensive side, Chapman really showed well and earned a spot on the team. And then Jordan Riley, who didn't really have a great camp, a 7th-round pick from 2023. He's kind of like the direct backup to Dexter Lawrence. I wouldn't expect to see him on the field much. Like, he's a guy that I'm almost positive would be like a healthy and active come week 1. But those are your 5 defensive linemen currently. In terms of any cuts that come to mind for that side of the ball, none are really sticking out, I don't believe. But yeah, as far as the defensive line goes, let's talk about edge. I guess Casey Rogers lands on the practice squad. He actually looked all right. He kind of looked better than Jordan Riley in some cases, but Rogers, still with the team. So as far as the edge group, this is actually going to have 5 members instead of 4. I kind of thought maybe there'd be 4. It's going to be 5. It's going to be Brian Burns, the big trade acquisition for the Carolina Panthers, Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari is your number 3. And look, Azeez did not have a great preseason. Look, I still think him as a third edge member, like that's pretty quality if he can be anywhere that he was the first couple of seasons. Now, he was from the Dave Gettleman regime originally. And then you have Boogie Basham and Ben Whitley. So, Ben Whitley, like that was a situation where he earned it. Ben Whitley, he's been in the league for a little bit, kind of bounced around. I believe he came from the Vikings organization. But Boogie Basham was okay. He wasn't bad, but they've stuck with him. Basham, that is. So that group is actually, I think that's a pretty good group when you look at this team. Pretty, in terms of the starters, in terms of the depth isn't awful. Again, if Ojulari can make an impact, that's kind of the key there. Timon Fox ends up on the practice squad. And I like what I've seen from Timon Fox, so happy to have him around still, too. As far as, let's go inside linebacker. So that's kind of somewhat of an up-in-the-air group behind Bobby Okereke in terms of injuries. So Bobby Okereke was a key member, really one of the leaders of the defense. He is going to be right in there in the middle. And then Micah McFadden is going to be the other likely starter. And he had a pretty good year last year with Okereke next to him. Now, McFadden was hurt in preseason. I think he should be good to go. It's too bad. Deontay Johnson, he was placed on IR. He actually also initially made that 53-man roster. And we'll talk about who took his spot. It was actually more of a special teams guy, Curtis Bolton, who's a linebacker, but I believe he's purely really special teams. But Deontay Johnson, I think if he can come back healthy, I think he could maybe make an impact defensively and maybe push McFadden, but obviously it's going to be tough. That was an unfortunate injury for sure. And then rounding out the rest of the linebackers, I guess Isaiah Simmons, if you want to consider him a linebacker, which I guess we can for this exercise, he's a bit of a hybrid sort of guy. But Simmons, you'll probably be more likely to see him, I guess, on passing downs. I'm not really exactly sure what his role will be, but he is in there. And then, more special teams, as I've kind of said previously, like with Carter Coughlin, who has, still, survived the test of time with this Giants team. He's been around since 2020, actually. But Coughlin, who's a core special teams member, he is on the squad. And then rookie sixth rounder Darius Mawasu, who, again, I think he is more special teams, but I guess there is a world where he could maybe with the Johnson injury and just seeing things, I wouldn't expect to see him out there in Shane Bowen's defense, but I guess if McFadden were hurt, I guess there's a world where Mawasu could maybe be out there. Now let's go to cornerback, which that's a weak position. There's just no way around it. And right now that crew is a 5-man unit of Deonte Banks, Cordell Flott, Nick McLeod, Drew Phillips, and Trey Hawkins. So Banks, you really need him to step up as that true cornerback one, which we don't know. We don't know. I think he's going to be a good player, but he could be better as CB2, but he'll be the number 1 for sure. And then I think the other one opposite him is probably going to be Cordell Flott, which is kind of scary considering he was hurt for a lot of the last few weeks, and he just really hasn't looked that good when he was healthy. Drew Phillips, I think, is really locked in as that nickel corner. The rookie out of Kentucky, 3rd-round pick. He's looked solid. Again, it's tough with a rookie, but I think he's going to be right in there. And then Nick McLeod's kind of like a jack of all trades, I think, inside or outside. I kind of would rather have McLeod out there than Flott if it were me. And then, and then there's Trey Hawkins, who there was a lot of buzz about last year. Not as much now. 6th-round guy from 2023. We'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I thought the Giants at some point were going to maybe try to get a cornerback. It just has not happened. And so this is by far one of the weakest units on this team, and it's an important one too, which isn't great. So don't love that. In terms of cuts that come to mind for the corners, like Trey Herndon was a veteran that came in that, they let him go. I think he was more of a slot corner. And I guess Alex Johnson was a corner converted to safety. I think it's one of the two. I think it was a corner from UCLA converted to safety. He's actually on the practice squad. And now let's actually go to the safety position. So what happens there is originally it was going to be 4 players, Jason Pinnock, Tyler Nubin, Dane Belton, and Javarius Owens. But then what ends up happening is the Giants, the one claim they make is Anthony Johnson Jr., who ironically was also a 7th-round pick from 2023, similar to Javarius Owens. Now, Johnson was drafted before Owens. He was actually drafted 1 pick ahead of Jordan Riley. So Johnson seems like a decent enough pickup, made some contributions as a rookie with the Packers. And so he'll be in that safety room, which the starters will very likely be Pinnock and Nubin. Again, not great, but compared to the cornerbacks, better, I would say, if Nubin can contribute as a rookie. And then Dane Belton, he's shown that he has he's near the ball. Like Belton's not great, but he's shown he has a knack for interception. So look, if he were to come in there, it's not the end of the world, but I think, that's the 4. And then with Javarius Owens, still haven't had word on Owens as far as, I would assume that he would somehow land back in the practice squad. I believe he'll almost certainly clear waivers if he hasn't already. But yeah, haven't had any official word on that yet because Owens, again, he made that initial 53-man roster. So I would think that, and he was a draft pick from last season. So I think he'll still be around. And I actually thought Owens didn't really look that bad in preseason, but I understand why they did that. And then just as far as special teams, Graham Gano is your kicker. Jamie Gillen is your punter, and then the long snapper is Casey Cryer. That's what it's been. Hopefully Gano, coming off injury, will be the way that he had been previously, but there's probably got to be a little bit of concern, as obviously he's getting up there in age, but that is going to be kicker, punter, long snapper. So yeah, that's a current look at the 2024 Giants. Like I said, I'm sure that from now until week 1, which is about a week and a half away, there's going to be some changes. Definitely. And I think that the roster is not the greatest for sure. But, hopefully Joe Shane and Brian Dable are able to round things into form and the Giants can be a competitive team. I think those first 2 games are going to be crucial. Vikings and Commanders, you have to come out of there with at least 1 win. Really, if not 2. But I'll say this, if they go 0-2, I really, really think you could be looking at, a pretty disastrous season. So a lot is going to ride. You don't want to make too much of it, right? 17-game season. Those first 2 games, I think, are going to be critical in what is this 100th anniversary season for the New York Giants.